Joining us now for a World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin.
Baby,
good morning,
my
dear sister. You're not going to get greeted from me this morning.
Useless win. Don't you want money to do it?
I've told you.
They beat you, accept it.
This is my issue. Yes. Good morning. Good morning, Ayo.
Come on, you gotta.
If it's not Ijebu that I'm defending,
they beat you.
It's Arsenal. I've just been jegged by everywhere today and I'm tired. Arsenal, I don't like what you did to us last week. I don't like what you did to us on Sunday, but it's okay. We're still 4 points clear. Good morning to you viewers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Minneapolis. Let us start with what we know. On Saturday, the 24th of January, just after 9 a.m., Alex Pretty, he was a 37-year-old intensive care nurse. He was shot and killed by U.S. Border Patrol agents during ongoing protests against federal immigration enforcement operations in the city. Now, federal authorities say Pretty was shot after he approached Border Patrol agents with a handgun and resisted efforts to disarm him. But we'd like you to watch this video. It clearly shows Pretty with a phone in his hand. In fact, no publicly available footage shows him brandishing a weapon at any time. To be clear, Pretty did legally own a handgun and did have a permit to carry. What we also see are the agents who subdued him first, and a firearm believed to belong to Pretty was then removed from his waistband before he was shot at least 10 times. All of this while Pretty was already restrained on the ground. It took 24 seconds after the final shot was fired for agents to search Pretty's body, and one agent is heard asking, "Where's the gun?" Again, reinforcing the point that Pretty was not brandishing a weapon at the time those agents dispelled lethal force. Now, US President Donald Trump and his administration, including the Department of Homeland Security Chief Kristi Noem, have defended the operation, saying the agents were fearful of their lives, arguing that agents confronted a hostile situation and that accountability will follow standard procedures. However, at the state level, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has condemned the shooting as sickening, and he's demanded the withdrawal of untrained federal agents from the state of Minnesota, saying that the action has only escalated tensions. The governor's office also alleges that state investigators were initially blocked from accessing the scene. Pretty's parents have released a searing statement calling the administration's descriptions sickening lies and insisting their son was unarmed and acting to protect others. They urge the public to seek the truth about what happened to their son. And in a national statement that underscores the broader political ripple effects of this incident, you have former US President and First Lady Barack and Michelle Obama describing the killing as a heartbreaking tragedy. It should also be a wake-up call to every American, regardless of party, that many of our core values as a nation are increasingly under assault, under increasing strain. Now, if we go on, you do have the likes of Bill Clinton, another former US president, releasing a statement. This time he said that the people in charge are lying to the public and they are telling them not to believe what we have seen with our own eyes. Now, just weeks earlier, on the 7th of January, you'll remember that Renee Nicole Good, who was also 37 years old, also a US citizen, she also was a parent, she was a mother, and she was fatally shot in her car by a US Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent during a federal enforcement operation also in Minneapolis. So it feels as though Minnesota, especially is especially under fire this January. Let's move on to the Middle East, and Israel has agreed a limited reopening of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt once its military operation to locate hostages in the southern Gaza area is complete. Now, the move is a core pillar of the US brokered ceasefire. It does reflect Washington's leverage over humanitarian access too. Now, Israel's demand for the return of the last hostage, his name is Ran Givili, has been widely seen as the last obstacle to opening the Rafah crossing and the beginning of the US brokered ceasefire's second phase. Now, the border was supposed to have opened during the initial phase of Donald Trump's plan to end this war last October. If you remember, Rafah This Rafah border crossing, it remains Gaza's only crossing not directly controlled by Israel, making its reopening strategically critical for the flow of aid and, of course, regional stability. Lastly, let's come home to the African continent, where personal items belonging to Nelson Mandela, including his prison key, sunglasses, and a shirt, can now be sold. That's after his daughter, Makaziwe Mandela, won a court battle in South Africa. Now, this is about 70 different personal items, 70 of them, including, as I said, a cell key from Robben Island, where Mandela was imprisoned for 18 of those 27 years, a pair of aviator sunglasses, and one of his signature floral shirts. Now, they were due to be exported to the United States for auction. Now, the objects belong to his eldest daughter, Mazakiwe, as well as Christo Brand, who was a Robben Island warden during Mandela's imprisonment, incarceration there. Now, in trying to stop their sale, the authorities said that those items were part of the country's heritage and were therefore legally protected from export. Now, the ruling has reignited debates over the commercialization of Mandela's legacy, with critics arguing that such artifacts form part of South Africa's cultural heritage and should remain in the public trust. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But before we do, let's take a look at our newspaper headlines from across the world. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day. Now, This Day firstly reports that Minister of Culture, Tourism and the Creative Economy, Hannatu Musawa, has warned that altering the Tinubu-Shetima presidential ticket or dropping a Northern Muslim candidate could seriously weaken the APC's chances in 2027. She's describing the move as politically risky, perhaps naive and disconnected from entrenched northern voting realities. Staying with This Day, it also reports that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, will today depart for Turkey. He's leaving Abuja, heading to Turkey, aimed at strengthening bilateral ties and expanding cooperation in areas including security, education, social development, innovation, and aviation. And before we go, This Day also reports that Shell PLC plans to invest an additional $20 billion in Nigeria's oil and gas sector. This is quite significant. Now, you'll remember that initially there was a successful $7 million deal, and that is now going to be dwarfed by this $20 billion deal. Now, essentially, Shell has been citing President Tinubu's leadership and investment-friendly policies. Now, Shell CEO Wael Sawan said that the company is deepening its stake in projects such as the Bonga North or OML 118 as the proposed Bonga Southwest project, describing the move as a sea change from the past years. Now, Tinubu approved targeted investment linked to incentives to support the expansion, with directives for his energy team to facilitate their gazetting. So, a lot of development coming down the line. Shall we move on to the Daily Trust this morning? And moving on, we see that the Daily Trust is reporting that the military has submitted its investigation into the alleged coup plot against President Tinubu. If you remember, 16 officers were detained by the Defense Intelligence Agency, but they denied having any involvement in this alleged coup attempt. Now, moving on to the Daily Sun. The Daily Sun reports that the Oyo State Governor, Seyi Makinde, has criticized the Tinubu-led APC government, saying it has become difficult to speak truth to power, particularly over the handling of the tax reform bills. And if we take a look at our Daily Independent this morning, it does report that SERAP has issued the Minister of Power, Adebayo Adelabu, and Mbet over, essentially they want to sue them over the alleged failure to account for the 128 billion naira in public funds, citing findings in the Auditor General's 2025 report linking corruption in the power sector to persistent grid supplies. The lawsuit seeks court orders compelling full disclosure of how the funds were spent, the officials involved, and the recovery of those monies. Now, The Punch also reports that the US recorded $1.45 billion trade surplus with Nigeria in the first 10 months of 2025, reversing a deficit from 2024 as exports surged to 60% while imports fell. Now, the New Telegraph reports that Nigerian airlines are flying at a loss. That's as passenger numbers continue to drop and operational costs remain high. Some routes are averaging below 50% occupancy, making it difficult to cover expenses, even at 70 to 80% load. Now, the Vanguard reports that the Nigerian tech sector could be losing up to $11 billion every year, and that's due to a shortage of skilled workers. Let's move on to our UK papers. The Daily Express has a member of Labour's National Executive Committee telling the Daily Express that Sir Keir Starmer, that's the UK Prime Minister, personally led calls to block Mr. Andy Burnham from being able to stand in order to return to Parliament. Now, if you get the context here, Keir Starmer himself has been fighting to stay relevant. He's trying to stay in power as the leader of the Labour Party, and it was feared that should Andy Burnham, who is currently the mayor of Manchester, be allowed to run an election, he could threaten Keir Starmer's position. And so that's why essentially this paper is reporting that the Prime Minister himself saw to it that Andy Burnham was not allowed to stand in the election. The official line was that they can't afford a new election in Manchester, but we'll see what happens there. And finally, the Financial Times does report that some Republicans have condemned the fatal shooting of ICU nurse Alex Pretty by a federal officer in Minneapolis, according to their own reporting. So those are your newspaper headlines and your well brief. Love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, it shows Starmer is really scared. I think he was part of those that voted and he came out 8-1 because Andy Burnham, it's not today Andy Burnham tried to push for being the Labour leader. I remember the time with them, Yvette Cooper and the likes. I think Corbyn beat him then. But he had gone to rejig himself, refit himself. He's done so well in Manchester, Greater Manchester as mayor, and he's come back now to the political terrain. And it's looking good for him. He's got a big buzz in the party. As regards Trump, I am not surprised. So I'm somebody that reads history for the fun of it. I mean, I'm kind of that guy on a Friday night that likes to read history rather than go out. And I've seen all of this happen before. And I tell you, I'm not surprised. See, when the ICE official killed Reed, what happened? Nothing. In fact, they blamed the lady that was killed. Christian Nunn came out and they told blatant lies until we saw the video afterwards. Now, they've killed Pretty. They took the gun from Pretty. He was not in harm's way any longer. He couldn't even pull out the trigger. And they killed him. And now they're making excuses. So this has come out there in their face. I bet you the DOJ will do nothing about it. Because they're in concert with Trump. What do you expect? That's why a bishop in the church in America was praying yesterday and saying, in this fight for our lives and for humanity, we might probably get killed. Because America is very unsafe to live in today. And for good measure, do you know who the DOJ is going after?
Let's hear.
Don Lemon, the journalist. Because Don Lemon went to cover an anti-ICE protest in a church, like a journalist would do, got the camera in there and all of that. The DOJ is quoting some law and they say they needed to call in Don Lemon for questioning as regards that. So the two killers, the killer of Pretty, the killer of Reed,
Renee Good,
they didn't go after them. Don Lemon, that was just doing his job as a journalist, covering a protest, spoke to the pastor. Don Lemon is the problem. It happened in 1930 America when Hitler had infiltrated America with right-wing groups like the Silver Shirts and the likes, and even paid money to American senators, the like of Senator Lundy. I mean, you can go and listen to Richard Madow's Ultra on this. When they had infiltrated the system, that's why America couldn't go into the Second War on time. It took the bombing of Pearl Harbor for America to be able to go full throttle in the war because the German propaganda machinery had infiltrated America. So I'm not surprised that this is happening. In fact, but the question is, who are those that will stand for the truth at a time like this? Can you imagine that the killers of Reed and the killers of Pratt will be let go just like that? But who is the DOJ chasing?
Well, they said the investigation is still ongoing.
Femi, I'm so sure. Like I was sure that Man United beat Arsenal yesterday.
You didn't need to do that, but okay.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Like I was sure that Man United beat Arsenal yesterday. I'm so sure nothing will come out of the investigation and the DOJ will do nothing.
Let's see.
All right, so this is a defining moment, I would say, for America, especially with President Donald Trump's anti-immigration deportation stance, especially with how, the Border Patrol agents, ICE, have been criticized for their heavy-handedness and lack of due process, and their tactical response has been questioned. It's been questioned by former President Barack Obama. It's been questioned by former President Bill Clinton. In fact, across party lines, as you saw in the headline story there, that even some Republicans are coming out out now to speak against this.
Yes.
Why is this so? In just a few weeks, this is the second American citizen to be killed. Alex Pretty was born in Illinois, so he was born on American soil. He's lived in America. There were a few things, and some of the things that have come out as well is a discrepancy in the reports of events by federal agents and what actually happened. First of all, they said that he was carrying a weapon, but it's now been found out that he had legal rights to carry that weapon.
Yes.
They said, why did he bring? President Trump had asked the question why he brought the weapon to a protest ground, and was said it was a public space, so he actually had the rights legally to have that weapon on him. They said he was brandishing the weapon and was threatening the officers. Footage has now come out to show that it was actually not. It was in his pocket. As a nurse working with the Veterans Hospital in Minnesota, there's also an emotional side to this. The fact that he has served the nation at almost one of the most sacred and revered areas when it comes to American history. When we talk about veterans, there's a lot of respect. There's a day dedicated to honoring veterans in the United States of America, and he served as an intensive care unit nurse. His family members have come out to describe his person. He has no criminal record, criminal history, so it's difficult to understand where they say or classify him as a domestic terrorist. Yes. It will be difficult for the federal agents to classify him as that, and then also the number of times he was shot. Early forensics have shown that he might have been shot 10 times in less than 5 seconds. And so if the aim was to disarm him from attacking the federal agents, then perhaps he needed not to have shot, that many times. So a number of things, and I believe, like I said, it's a watershed moment for America. It might now be an opportunity for them to review the actions of ICE, to review their mode of operations, to review their training processes, to what extent they've been trained, and even their presence in Minneapolis, which the people of Minneapolis are now calling for that ICE should be taken out completely from the state.
Okay, the death of Alex Pretty, 37. You have to look at it in terms of how this seems to be like a trend in the state of Minnesota. It was in this same state in the year 2020 that George Floyd was murdered when he talked about the knee on his neck. It was in this same state this month, with Trump back in the saddle, that Rennie Good, 37-year-old, was shot dead, again by immigration and customs enforcement officials. Now, it is in this same state that you have now had the murder of Alex Pretty, again, also 37 years old. A man who has been described as very loving, loves his dog, loves his mountain biking, and, works to look after military veterans as an ICU section nurse. And everything that ICE, Border Patrol, Department of Homeland Security have all said have turned out to be lies. It's been established that he was not carrying a shotgun and that he was shot. He was pepper sprayed. He was hit. Just because he was carrying a phone and trying to record the behavior of security officials. Questions raised are as follows. The use of force by federal immigration officials. 2, the need for an investigation. 3, the need for the prosecution of the official that fired. Even Republicans are dismayed. The 4th point will seem to be the irony of it. The same President Donald Trump, who says he wants to save people all over the world, Bird of Peace, Christians in Nigeria, and all that, is supporting a situation whereby citizens, American citizens, are being killed in their own country. It is that irony that is most embarrassing. Quickly, Nelson Mandela, he was imprisoned for 27 years. He was released in 1990. In 1993, he got the Nobel Prize. In 1994, he became, the president of South Africa, the Rainbow Coalition. And now in death, years later, his artifacts have been fought over all the way to the Supreme Court of South Africa. It just reinforces the symbolism of the man, his enduring relevance. His daughter says, okay, we can sell we can sell about 63 items or so, including prison key, including his multicolor shirt, including
his ID book,
his identity book, including a copy of the South African Constitution that he signed. In fact, the key alone, the prison key alone, on auction is attracting about 1.3 million pounds. So it's about the continuing symbolism of the man. And Sarah, South Africa, Heritage Agency, say, well, these things belong to the South African state.
Yes.
All of that is just about, how well he lived his life, his symbolism, his importance, his relevance. But the Supreme Court has now said, the Heritage Agency broadly defined the relevance of those artifacts. But that's one thing to take away is about his continuing symbolism. And finally, as for the Rafah crossing, Israel will do what it wants to do. They have not given any firm commitment. They say they are looking for the body of Glivi, who is the remaining last hostage. How soon they do that, we'll see. But the Americans are interested in that Rafah crossing being opened because it is what links, the 2 million people in the Gaza Strip to the outside world.
Absolutely.
But it's a developing story. We'll see whether Netanyahu will listen to reason. Thank you very much indeed.